have to restore trust and build a relationship with the state. And I believe the state also sees it too as a need. We have to get beyond politics and party differences because there's places where we actually agree with one another. And where we agree, we need to double down, triple down on those agreements to get things done.
Hello, and thanks again for joining us for special election coverage of the race to become Atlanta's 61st mayor. And in an amazing reversal of fortune, City Councilman Andre Dickens handily defeated former City Council President Felicia Moore in the runoff election. Now it's time to take a closer look at what awaits Mayor-Elect Dickens. Joining us now to discuss, Dr. Maurice Hobson. He's an associate professor of African American Studies and historian at Georgia State University. He's also an author and lover of all things Atlanta politics. Dr. Hobson, welcome. Pleasure to see you.
It's always good to see you, good brother.
Absolutely. Well, let's begin with a couple of words that I think Felicia Moore's camp is using today, or right after the election. What happened? I mean, there she was with a commanding victory on election day back on the 2nd of November, and things just totally flipped. What in the world happened in the city of Atlanta?
And Felicia Moore, from everything that I understand, has been a great public servant in this city and has being good folks. But the interesting thing about it is when you're in Atlanta, you always have to deal with what's in Atlanta. And what I mean by that is, as someone who's not from Atlanta, who's made a home here in Atlanta, one of the things I learned very quickly is you have to go to the people. And Mayor-Elect Andre Dickens did that. You can never, ever discount the culture. That Atlanta popular culture, the Black Hollywood conversation, the hip hop, the Motown of the South conversation, but also, all of the other things that make Atlanta ripe for all kinds of different conversations. And the culture spoke. Mayor-Elect Andre Dickens was able to get the culture out behind him. And, that presents, it represents, the young and vibrant city in which we live in particular ways. And Mayor-Elect Dickens is a homeboy. He's the homie. So, hey, they elected the homie, but then there's also folks who could see his progressive ideas.
Right. So, it's interesting too, because Mayor-Elect Dickens put public safety on the forefront, made it a campaign issue, and won with it. So how do you get tough on crime and at the same time be very wary of the social justice conversation that's going on all across this country right now?
I will say this, I'm not an elected official, so I don't always have to kind of use the buzzwords that elected officials would use. But in order to be tough on crime, you have to be smart on crime. We do have to do some real work with criminal reform. There's some people in jail that shouldn't be in jail, and we need to, really work that out. But then, the other side of this is that, this issue around public safety and what that has meant in Atlanta, the crime, raising and all kinds of different things. It puts me in the mind of understanding who Maynard Jackson was when he decided to run for mayor in 1973. And then, that one of the major issues in Atlanta was the blight that was on the police force. And so this conversation around public safety is extremely important, because we must look at aspects of, police reform. I know that there's a movement, particularly in this social justice, that talks about abolishing the police. And I don't know if abolishing the police is necessarily the answer. I won't say that. But what we can do is we can always, think about ways in which we can reform how we understand policing. We could, provide different kinds of wraparound services in terms of mental health and all kinds of different things. And a lot of what we've witnessed, particularly in the last 4 years in this city in terms of crime, was exacerbated by COVID-19 and the racial issues, the eruption that took place in 2020 as a result of the killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, and countless others. And so police, the whole idea of public safety is an important one. And I do believe that Mayor-Elect Dickens will put the right people around him that will give him some ideas about better ways to police. Another thing I want to just kind of throw out here, and I hope that my friend that I'm about to reference doesn't doesn't get upset with me in doing this. A really good friend of mine, former city council president, Caesar Mitchell. He's a fraternity brother of mine. And one of the things I've known in having conversations with him is his father was a police officer here in Atlanta. And one of the things about when his father was a police officer is if something went down in their community, their father, C.C. Mitchell, would show up because he was from the community. He knew all of the parties in the community, and he could diffuse a situation because if there was an issue going on in the family, he probably knew the family. That's one of the things that we have to consider when we talk about moving forward in Atlanta is we got to put community police back into the community, but we also have to look at different ways in which we can reform smarter police and provide the kind of wraparound services and healthcare that's needed for the public.
All right. When you talk about coalition building, which Mayor-Elect Dickens was very successful at in order to get this kind of victory, and you talk about embracing the community. Remember, Buckhead is part of the community. So how do we kind of move that secession talk along, and let's figure out how to be a better community together in all parts of the city?
Well, I believe that Mayor-Elect Dickens, he has several advantages. I mean, on one aspect, he is a trained engineer, Georgia Tech graduate, and engineers solve problems. They create different devices or opportunities to solve problems, whether it's, getting rid of water or using space more adequately and whatnot. So he is trained in how to solve problems. But what he also has is at his disposal is he has all of these older mayors of Atlanta who are still alive. I mean, from a Sam Massell to an Andrew Young, to a Bill Campbell, to a Shirley Franklin, and even to a Kasim Reed and Keisha Lance Bottoms. I mean, the thing about it is you have to sit in that seat. And one of the interesting things is that, folks believe that, when you step into being mayor the first day, that you just know how to be mayor, but there is a learning curve, and that's why we see the first 100 days of a mayorship or first 100 days of a presidency for them to be brought up to speed so that they can have an idea on what it is that they're tackling. And then there's another side of this. Day-to-day political figures are faced with real issues that come out of the blue, and you have to be able to try to make the best decision with all of the information that you have. As a historian who has the opportunity to sit back and look at things from 50,000 feet and over 20 years, I can say a lot of things about what people did right and wrong, but to be in the moment, I mean, that's very difficult to do. So I'm here to say this on the record. Being the mayor of any city is hard work, but particularly being the mayor of Atlanta, Georgia is particularly hard.
Absolutely. So in that vein, let's talk about Mayor Lance Bottoms and her legacy. I mean, is it fair to even characterize a legacy for Mayor Bottoms? I mean, look what she had to deal with. I mean, she had to deal with an unprecedented situation, both economically and the health crisis. And then there was the friction between the state and the city. So, I mean, she was dealing with problems that we had never seen before, and for which there was no manual. There was no playbook for how to deal with the economy, the pandemic, and a state government that wants to go against you at every turn.
Well, and this is the thing. I think it is unfair for us to be harsh on Mayor Lance Bottoms. I believe that she did a much better job than I would have done. And this is the thing as well. I mean, no one could see a worldwide pandemic coming. I mean, no one could ever really think that that would happen. But then, the racial unrest that took place in 2020, and there were many that couldn't believe that Atlanta exploded. But those who didn't know that Atlanta would explode, they need to do a little bit of a history lesson on Atlanta. I mean, there was the Summer Hill Rebellion that took place in 1966. There was the Dixie Hill Rebellion that took place in 1967. I mean, there were the Rodney King rebellions that took place in the 1990s. There were several in the 80s, the Eddie Lee Callahan, rebellion, particularly, against police brutality. But then on the flip side of it too, and this is one of the things that I have always stated to my students when I teach. Whenever you hear someone talk about states' rights, historically, before 2016, I would always tell my students, regardless of how you identified in the world, if you hear someone talking about states' rights, you need to run as fast as you can from them. But what's interesting is after the election, or the stealing of the election by the 45th president of the United States, one of the things that had to happen is, because of the executive orders and the federal the federal executions that the 45th president of the United States enacted, we had to basically pivot on the political landscape, and we had to use states' rights to protect us from the president of the United States. And we saw how all of that reached a fever's pitch on January 6th, 2021, just hours after Georgia officially turns blue with the election of John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock as both the senators. And so, when we begin to see and understand that, the thing about it is, on the state level, I mean, the governor was extremely recalcitrant towards Mayor Lance Bottoms. Historically, how that looks in terms of a white man, Southern white man, and all of the implications of what race relations are like now in today's society. And this Black woman who was really working hard to try to keep the city as safe as possible, particularly in terms of protest when young people were out in the streets and there was a raging pandemic. It's difficult to do. Another thing that was really difficult for Mayor Lance Bottoms was the relationship with the police. I mean, after the handling of the curfew, the curfew with George Floyd, and then with the Rayshard Brooks killing, and the firing of police, there was widely believed that there was this kind of blue out, that the police were not working for Mayor Lance Bottoms in particular ways. And so there were real tensions that Mayor Lance Bottoms had to navigate. And but I will say this, Mayor Lance Bottoms is a daughter of Atlanta, always tried to keep Atlanta near and dear to her heart, always kind of leaned into aspects of the culture, and always, tried to listen to the elders who had some insight for her. So, I think her legacy is one that she will go down in history as one who really had to stand tall during a thankless moment in this country's history.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you talk about the reset here that needs to be done for Mayor-Elect Dickens with the city and state, how does one begin that process? I mean, we are so ideologically, opposed right now. We're on opposite ends of the spectrum. We clearly have one party who thinks that democracy is a thing of the past and is moving us toward authoritarianism. And we have another party that's interested in governing and helping all the people. So how do we begin to mend fences in this climate, in this political climate that, none of us have seen during our lifetime? As bad as things were in the 60s and early 70s, I mean, we've never seen anything like this where people are just saying the quiet part out loud.
And this is something that is particularly gut-wrenching in today's society. It's my belief that the governor actually saw himself as playing a larger role in national politics, or had aspirations to go into national politics, and so in many ways he would be the 45th president 2.0 in certain ways. But I remember back in May of 2020 when it was announced that the state of Georgia would reopen. I remember even President Trump is saying, I don't know, that might be a little early. But the thing about it is, there are good people on all sides of the aisle. There are people who will put democracy first. The Secretary of State here in the state of Georgia, who received a call from the President of the United States before President Biden, and was asking for those votes to be recounted in many ways. And the Secretary of State, Raffensperger, he stood up and did the right thing. And that's the idea is, hey, we can disagree on how to get to the quote unquote beloved community or promised land. We can disagree. But at the end of the day, as long as I know that you're interested in getting to the beloved community or the promised land, then I can kind of get with you. And so what Mayor-Elect Dickens will have to do is to really reach across the aisle will, utilize, the networks in terms of, the tech community, which is really smart. Of course, the Georgia Tech community, the Georgia State community in many kinds of ways. But then, really, use his political acumen to be able to get some things done that will protect the people of Atlanta. And hopefully, with Atlanta leading the way in the state of Georgia, I mean, so as Atlanta goes, so does the state of Georgia. What happens is, if it allows for Atlanta to kind of step out there and be one of the mainstays in the state of Georgia on how the state will be represented to move something forward, move democracy forward in the best way.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that. You mentioned as the city of Atlanta goes, so goes the state of Georgia. We are a global city with global tentacles, especially when it comes to economic opportunity. But not everyone is able to cash in. When you look at the Black and brown population, we are one of the states that is down near the bottom when it comes to being able to pull yourself up out of poverty through economic and educational opportunities. So how does Mayor-Elect Dickens navigate, those global opportunities, the Fortune 500 companies that are here, while still addressing, the concerns of those people who are just trying to make it, just trying to get by?
So several years ago, I wrote a book titled "The Legend of the Black Mecca: Politics and Class in the Making of Modern Atlanta." And what I do in the book is I really look at post 1965 Atlanta. As a matter of fact, I actually start the conversation on Atlanta in 1864 when William Tecumseh Sherman marches through the city and burns down the city, and what happens from that. But what we get from that is you have several different kinds of Atlanta. Like, one of the greatest aspects of Atlanta is Atlanta's ability to booster itself. I mean, it's the city of with the wind, but it's also the city too busy to hate. It's also the Black Mecca. It's also hot Atlanta. It's all of these, it's the New York of the South. It's the Motown of the South. It's all of these things. But the thing about this too is that before Maynard Jackson, well, what Mayor-Elect Dickens can do, is to really lean into those elders and learn from those who have sat in that seat before. I mean, even from a William Hartsfield, who understood that if he could present Atlanta as being something different than a Birmingham or Selma or Montgomery or Little Rock or New Orleans or Dallas, that Atlanta could be the poster child for race relations. Ivan Allen does the same thing, but Ivan Allen takes it even further, because Ivan Allen was interested in making this city be like a sports and entertainment franchise kind of city, which attracts particular ideas. Sam Massell, the first Jewish mayor of Atlanta, did that in a lot of ways. But the interesting thing about it is, when Maynard Jackson is elected to become the city's first Black mayor, one of the things that Maynard Jackson does is he creates this gold standard of affirmative action, which subsequently gives about 35% of all city contracts to minority contractors. In the 1970s and 80s, minority overwhelmingly meant Black in many ways. Meant Black, or it meant, woman owned. And so if you think about it, from 1973 to 1993, between the elections of Mayor Jackson and Mayor Young, Atlanta hosted about $10 billion in city contracts, and they gave 35% of $10 billion to minority contractors. And what that does is that attracts a lot of talent from around the world. They all want to come to Atlanta to get some of this money. So, 3.5 billion of $10 billion is going to minority contractors. It attracts all kinds of entrepreneurs, slicksters, hustlers, all kind of folks that come into the city. But the thing about that too is, when Maynard Jackson steps into office, I think that only the Black contractors were getting 0.3% of city contracts. Maynard changes that, and he does make Atlanta the most inclusive city in the United States. But it doesn't trickle all the way down to those who have the least. And in the context of Atlanta, particularly in 1970, Atlanta was 67% of African descent. 1980s, 68%. 1990, 67%. 1990 is when Atlanta bids for the Olympic Games. What we begin to see here is that you have this group of people, but in today's society, Atlanta is 49.5% of African descent, which demonstrates that people have been displaced, that communities have been renewed and gentrified in ways. And those that have suffered the most are the low income, no income people and the homeless people who were disfranchised, criminalized, and demonized and displaced, based on what I call the Olympification of Atlanta. So what we have to do, we have to really look at conversations around urban renewal and gentrification. We have to have those serious conversations around public safety. We have to have a serious conversation around partnering with our school systems in particular ways, because in Atlanta, we had a cheating scandal that failed a generation of Black and brown children. So the thing about it is that the mayor has some really big issues to tackle. He has to call some things out on the carpet, but I believe that he has the kind of understanding that he will put very smart people around him that will give him ideas.
Yeah, before we let you go, how important will it be for him to continue to coalition build, get those smart people around him in his cabinet, and make sure that we kind of dust ourselves off from this legacy of this cloud of corruption? Because every candidate talked about it during this election cycle, was the cloud of corruption that's hanging over City Hall. How do we, move past that and look towards sunnier skies? Because I think that's going to be the key, especially for Mayor-Elect Dickens, as he's going out here and, bidding for trying to get new eyeballs on the city of Atlanta to come do business here and to bring your corporate headquarters here and to bring those opportunities here for all. I mean, we got the Microsoft building here. Google has a presence here. I mean, everybody's here. We've got more Hollywood studios here than any other place in the country, except Hollywood. So there is an opportunity for us to move forward if we can get rid of kind of some of these dark clouds.
Well, my thing is, if Mayor-Elect Dickens puts people first, puts people over politics, put people over profit, I think that that's a step in the right direction. He has been impressive, though, with his coalition building. And even though the voter turnout was small, Mayor-Elect Dickens won with a sizable vote. I mean, 64% of the vote, that's higher than what Maynard Jackson won both times. Maynard Jackson won with 58% of the vote and 57% of the vote, 57 and 58. Now, Ambassador Young, in his second term, he wins with 85% of the vote because he was so savvy in terms of, really building coalitions amongst business communities, communities of faith, and bringing an international presence to Atlanta. But the thing about it is, what we can't forget at this particular moment is, I hope that Mayor-Elect Dickens sees the city of Atlanta to become an ally for those that have been marginalized and disenfranchised. And in that, one of the major areas of coalition building that we should really tout and respect in many ways is that coalition building with women, particularly Black women who have really saved democracy in so many ways. And I'm saying this because most recently I chaired a study that was done at Georgia State University that demonstrated that in the state of Georgia, women, Black, white, Latinx, all kinds of women, die at a much higher rate on delivery tables while giving birth to children than any other state in the United States. And if that happens for all women, of course, Black women suffer at the most. And we're talking about bringing children into this world. And so one of the things that we have to do is, I would like to see City Hall become an ally to really try to better the quality of life of those that have been marginalized, that have been, disrespected, disenfranchised. Have serious conversations around, how can we help brown communities? How can we help the LGBTQIA community? How can we promote this idea that Ambassador Andrew Young calls democratic capitalism? How can we, capitalism is about winners and losers, but I think that there can be a newer version of it. And it's going to take some very, brilliant kind of people to be around a mayor like that, to figure out new ways and how we can do some things to move forward and truly make this the greatest city in the United States. It's a great city, but we can be better.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Maurice Hobson, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for your insight and your valuable knowledge. Wow, you are a wealth of information, and we appreciate your time and your expertise.
Well, thank you so much, my brother.
Absolutely. Dr. Maurice Hobson, an associate professor of African American Studies at Georgia State University. And for more information on Mayor-Elect Dickens and his platform positions, you can just go to AtlantaDailyWorld.com and look for the YouTube links to our interviews with him on those subjects and much more. For now, reporting from Atlanta for the Atlanta Daily World, I'm Mark Hayes.